Hi Founder fans, Jason here. Welcome to Founder of the Day. We are going to be discussing Federalist number 12 today. Sorry, the intro was a little bit longer than usual. I'll try and cut that out for the replay. New set, everything's new, trying things different. For some reason blushing, not working well, but that's okay. Let me know if you like the new setup or if you don't. That'll be fashionable. Either way, I'm not going to waste too much of your time. We're reading Federalist number 12 today, so let's get to it. Here we go. As I said, new setup. Let me know what you think. Federalist number 12, numero uno. Well, 1, 2. Anyway, utility of the Union in respect to revenue. New York Packet, November 27th, 1787. Alexander Hamilton. So Hamilton's coming back 2 days after the previous one where he was talking about the utility of the Union with respect to Navy and commerce. So now he's talking about revenue, not just how we could protect ourselves and how we could make money, but how the actual government can make money. So, as per usual, to the people of the state of New York. The effects of union upon the commercial prosperity of the states have been sufficiently delineated. Its tendency to promote the interests of revenue will be the subject of our present inquiry. So we talked about how it'll help us commercially. Let's talk about how it'll raise revenue. Again, link in the description if you'd like to read along with me. The prosperity of commerce is now perceived and acknowledged by all enlightened statesmen to be the most useful as well as the most productive source of national wealth, and has accordingly become a primary object of their political cares. So, enlightened statesmen. So, all smart leaders know that commerce is very good for making a nation very rich and is what they mostly talk about. Next sentence. By multiplying the means of gratification, by promoting the introduction and circulation of the precious metals, those darling objects of human avarice and enterprise, it serves to vivify and invigorate the channels of industry, and to make them flow with greater activity and copiousness. So, it's a long sentence to unpack that. By making it easier for precious metals, for currency to be attained, makes industry better, makes business better, the country is wealthier, blah, blah, blah. The assiduous merchant, the laborious husbandman, the active mechanic, and the industrious manufacturer, all orders of men look forward with eager expectation and growing alacrity to this pleasing reward of their toils. So everyone who does any job wants to make money. Okay. The often agitated question between agriculture and commerce has from indubitable experience received a decision which has silenced the rivalship that once subsisted between them, and has proved to the satisfaction of their friends that their interests are intimately blended and interwoven. So this is a fascinating sentence. Hamilton saying up front, commerce and agriculture have always been at odds. You know, do we grow things and sell it, or do we make things and sell it, essentially? And this would become an important discussion between Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson later on, a few years later when Jefferson gets back from France. But what he's saying here is it's not a rivalry. They work together. They make each other money. It has been found in various countries that in proportion as commerce has flourished, land has risen in value. So as a nation makes money and the community makes money, so too does the price of the land that's being farmed get more valuable. And how could it happen otherwise? Not much to translate there. Let's see. This is a kind of a long one. Oh, Hamilton's going to go on one of his question runs. Could that which procures a freer vent for the products of the earth, which furnishes new incitements to the cultivation of land, which is the most powerful instrument in increasing the quantity of money in a state, could that, in fine, which is the faithful handmaid of labor and industry in every shape, fail to augment that article, which is the prolific parent of far the greatest part of the objects upon which they are exerted. That's a big sentence. It's a big way to say growing food makes money. and therefore, anyone who wants to make money goes hand in hand with growing food somehow. It is astonishing that so simple a truth ever should have had an adversary, and it is one among a multitude of proofs how apt a spirit of ill-informed jealousy or of too great abstraction and refinement is to lead men astray from the plainest truths of reason and conviction. So, me, Alexander Hamilton, I'm surprised that this isn't as obvious to everyone else as it is to me, and that it's the argument between should we pursue agriculture and should we pursue commerce is one of jealousies. It's a partisan issue when it really shouldn't be. The ability of a country to pay taxes must always be proportioned, in a great degree, to the quantity of money in circulation and to the celerity with which it circulates. So, you put currency into circulation to have it circulate. And when it comes to taxing people, it should be pretty much based on how much money there is and how well it's circulating. Commerce, contributing to both these objects, must of necessity render the payment of taxes easier and facilitate the requisite supplies to the treasury. So, commerce, and when he says commerce, he means manufacturers. Oh, got something in my eye. Whoopsie daisy. That took me by surprise and hurt pretty bad. All right, bringing it back in. I'm all right. Commerce contributing to both objects. So when he says commerce, he means, sorry about that, that was distracting. When he says commerce, he basically means manufacturers, because again, this is the infancy of the Industrial Revolution, and they see this coming. So he's saying manufacturers both want to make money and therefore circulate money and will need to pay taxes. So we need to make sure the taxes are easy to pay, and I would assume just. The hereditary dominions of the Emperor of Germany contain a great extent of fertile, cultivated, and populous territory, a large proportion of which is situated in mild and luxuriant climates. All right, I did too many sentences there. So, you say in Germany, much like America, lots of people there, good land for farming, and it's being farmed. In some parts of this territory are to be found the best gold and silver mines in Europe. So they also got gold and silver, as well as nice farmland. And yet, from the want of the fostering influence of commerce, that monarch can boast but slender revenues. So, since they don't have commerce or trade or, industry in Germany, despite having gold and silver and having fertile, productive land, they have very little money raised for the government. He has several times been compelled to owe obligations to the pecuniary successors of other nations for the preservation of his essential interests, and is unable, upon the strength of his own resources, to sustain a long and continued war. So he's saying that the monarch of Germany needs to rely on the other nations of Europe for money, since he is unable or unwilling to raise it from his own people. What's interesting about this is he says the Emperor of Germany, he's essentially referencing the Holy Roman Empire, which is still around, but Germany is not Germany as it is today. There were many separate states at this point. For example, Frederick the Great was running Prussia, who was pretty good at raising money and warring. But it is not in this aspect of the subject alone that union will be seen to conduce to the purpose of revenue. So this is not the only reason we need the Constitution to raise revenue. There are other points of view in which its influence will appear more immediate and decisive. Okay, oh, that's too many sentences, but okay, so we have a few other examples. It is evident from the state of the country, from the habits of the people, from the experience we have had on the point itself, that it is impracticable to raise any very considerable sums by direct taxation. So, taxing the people directly does not raise enough money. From experience, from the habits of the people, it is impracticable to raise any very considerate sums by direct taxation. That is taxation on the people. And again, that was not part of the Constitution until, I think, what is it, the 16th Amendment, when they changed the words are eluding me. 16th Amendment, where they change the apportionment. There's no more need for apportionment between the states. Now they can tax people directly. Tax laws have in vain been multiplied. New methods to enforce the collection have in vain been tried. The public expectation has been uniformly disappointed, and the treasuries of the states remain empty. So the separate state governments have tried a whole bunch of ways to tax people directly, and they have not succeeded. The popular system of administration inherent in the nature of a popular government, coinciding with the real scarcity of money incident to a languid and mutilated state of trade, has hitherto defeated every experiment for extensive collections, and has at length taught the different legislatures the folly of attempting them. So what he's saying here is what Hamilton's saying here is in the state governments up to this point, though they have tried to raise money, first of all, referencing his previous paper saying there's not enough money, our trade isn't good enough, we're being out-traded by Europe, so we're not bringing enough money in, we don't have enough currency in circulation, and any attempt by the states to raise enough money has simply not worked. Take a quick sip of my water here. Okay. No person acquainted with what happens in other countries will be surprised at this circumstance. So, okay, people aware of what's happening internationally, they get it. They understand, Mr. Hamilton. In so opulent a nation as that of Britain, where direct taxes from superior wealth must be much more tolerable, and from the vigor of the government much more practicable than in America, far the greatest part of the national revenue is derived from taxes of the indirect kind, from imposts and from excises. So, even in Britain, where they have all this money, taxing the people directly hasn't helped. What they want to do is tax what are called indirect taxes, imposts and excises. A direct tax is when they come to you and say, you pay us tax. That's like our income tax, is a direct tax. Or the Stamp Act, as they said, as they had mentioned. The Stamp Act that the Patriots were so unhappy about was a direct tax, essentially, because they needed paper, they needed these things, and it was being paid by the people. The other side of it, the indirect tax, is when they don't tax you directly. They tax it on the way in. So you should still be able to buy something either way. Let's see. Troy, I think you did welcome, Troy. I think you did I Continentals. It needs to be exclamation point Continentals. But it should work. Thank you for coming. In America, it is evident that we must a long time depend for the means of revenue chiefly on such duties. So in America, we need to do these indirect taxes. In most parts of it, excises must be confined within a narrow compass. So we need to very specifically note what we're doing for, a narrow compass. We have to very specifically decide. The genius of the people will ill brook the inquisitive and peremptory spirit of excise laws. So the brilliant people of these United States of America will certainly understand what I'm going for here. The pockets of the farmers, on the other hand, will reluctantly yield but scanty supplies. in the unwelcome shape of impositions on their houses and lands. And personal property is too precarious and invisible a fund to be laid hold of in any other way than by the imperceivable agency of taxes on consumption. So even if we tax the farmers, we're not going to get much. They're going to be unhappy about it. It's going to make things very hard to do. It's a very hard thing to enforce. This is all fascinating because for some of the anti-federalists were largely saying, like, look, you could just tax everyone, just take everyone's money. This is Hamilton saying, no, that would be pointless for us to do. Granted, both the whiskey tax would happen, and then Fry's Rebellion would happen under John Adams, where they were taxing, like, literally property and, like, the amount of windows on your house. If these remarks have any foundation, that state of things, which will best in just real quick, the reason I brought that up is the anti-federalists are saying, look, you can come taxes, and Hamilton's not saying they won't. He's saying it would be unsuccessful. Troy, also let me know what you think of the new setup. If these remarks have any foundation, that state of things which will best enable us to improve and extend so valuable a resource must be best adapted to our political welfare. So if we want to make revenue for the government, we have to do it in a very American way. And it cannot admit of a serious doubt that this state of things must rest on the basis of a general union. So for us to do it, we need the Constitution. As far as this would be conducive to the interest of commerce, so far it must tend to the extension of the revenue to be drawn from that source. So, since we want to improve commerce, Hamilton already clarified that having industry and having farms are not at odds with each other. So we want both. And if we want commerce, commerce is where we're going to get the most revenue from when it comes to taxes. As far as it would contribute to rendering regulations for the collection of the duties more simple and efficacious, got it. As far as it would contribute to rendering regulations for the collection of the duties more simple and efficacious, so far it must serve to answer the purpose of making the same rate of duties more productive, and of putting it into the power of the government to increase the rate without prejudice to trade. So, to make things easier, more simple and efficacious, which is, I guess, effectual, we must make the duties more productive. We need to give the government under the Constitution the ability to raise these duties without the prejudice to trade is the important part there. It's not, a certain state might import extra stuff and they'd unfairly, label, say Virginia makes a lot of tomatoes, then anyone, they might lower or raise the fee on importing tomatoes, and that would affect trade. The federal government would be less biased in that nature because the federal government isn't really directly bringing things in like states might be. The relative situation of these states, the number of rivers with which they are intersected and of bays that wash their shores, the facility of communication in every direction, the affinity of language and manners, the familiar habits of intercourse. All these are circumstances that would conspire to render an illicit trade between them a matter of little difficulty, and would ensure frequent evasions of commercial regulations of each other. So, in the previous discussion, yes, taxes are very complicated, Troy, absolutely. In the previous discussion he had in number 11, he was saying that these waterways are very important. They tie us together. They will help us with the union. We'll have better access to them as a union. And now he's saying if we don't have a union, then those very waterways could be our undoing, because even if the different states had regulations and imposts and indirect taxes, they could be pretty easily avoided. The separate states or confederacies would be necessitated by mutual jealousy to avoid the temptations to that kind of trade by the lowness of their duties. So, separate states would be by mutual jealousies. Okay, so mutual jealousies. The disagreements or the envies or passions of the separate states, they would end up lowering the amount of taxes trying to beat their neighbors, and therefore wouldn't raise quite as much as they need, much like the Emperor of Germany, as he referenced before. The temper of our governments, for a long time to come, would not permit those rigorous precautions by which the European nations guard the avenues into their respective countries, as well by land as by water, and which, even there, are found insufficient obstacles to the adventurous stratagems of avarice. So, into the distant future, these state governments, if they don't unite under the Constitution, would keep running into these problems. The same problems you see Europe having, where the people keep sneaking in without paying the duties keep getting lowered to beat their neighbors, and it's all because of avarice. You know, it's people being not nice. Okay. In France, there was an army of patrols, as they are called, constantly employed to secure their fiscal regulations against the inroads of the dealers in contraband trade. So patrols. So basically, France has police officers who are there just to make sure people are not illegally trading. Mr. Necker computes the number of these patrols at upwards of 20,000. I do not know who Mr. Necker is. I will have to look that up. Maybe he'll be a founder of the day. He's probably France. But upward of 20,000 police officers in France just trying to make sure people are not avoiding their taxes. And I'll remind you, Hamilton is writing this to an audience who just fought off a monarch against taxation. But most people understood taxes were important. I want to note very quickly that many of the American revolutionaries threw off the government not because they didn't want to pay any taxes, but because they didn't want to pay direct taxes. So earlier in this paper where Hamilton was discussing direct taxes and saying, hey, we should not pay direct taxes, that would have been music to people's ears. Indirect taxes, people still don't want to pay, but they are a lot more accustomed to that, because even if the Constitution never happens, the states still needed to raise money somehow. This shows the immense difficulty in preventing that species of traffic where there is an inland communication, and places in a strong light the disadvantages with which the collection of duties in this country would be encumbered, if by disunion the states should be placed in a situation, with respect to each other, resembling that of France with respect to her neighbors. So he's saying, just like France has in Europe, if we would need thousands of police officers, or patrols as they called them back then, to guard every street and back channel, to storm through the woods, just making sure that people pay their taxes. And that's going to cost us a whole lot of money. The arbitrary and vexatious powers with which the patrols are necessarily armed would be intolerable in a free country. So, these police officers are given way more power than the people of his contemporary United States would ever be comfortable with, just in the name of raising money for the separate states. But, as he's about to get to, if we come together under the Constitution, we won't have to worry about that. If, on the contrary, there be but one government pervading all the states, there will be, as to the principal part of our commerce, but one side to guard, the Atlantic coast. His capital is not mine. Now, he is ignoring Spain and Britain in Canada and the West. Putting that aside, he is hereby assuming Manifest Destiny, as it would later be known, and assuming Canada comes on board, essentially, although then eventually there would be Pacific Coast. So I'm not going to grieve about that too much, but you understand what he's saying. Basically, we'd only have to worry about making sure duties are paid on boats coming in on the water. Vessels arriving directly from foreign countries, laden with valuable cargoes, would rarely choose to hazard themselves to the complicated and critical perils which would attend attempts to unlade prior to the coming into port. So what he's saying here is there is very small chance that other nations would ever attempt to smuggle into our coasts, totally ignoring the century of smuggling that many of the revolutionaries he fought with were a part of. John Hancock, anyone? But it would be more difficult for foreigners to do it because that could more easily lead to war. You're not just a criminal within your nation, you are doing it on foreign soil. So I will give Hamilton that. They would have to dread both the dangers of the coast and of detection, as well after as before their arrival at the place of their final destination. So not only do they have to sneak past the ships guarding the coast, they would still have to, unload the stuff and then leave the port before anyone saw them, any customs agent. An ordinary degree of vigilance would be competent to the prevention of any material infractions upon the rights of the revenue. An ordinary degree of vigilance. So just anyone doing their job in a standardly, moderately decent fashion would be able to make sure this doesn't happen. Troy over here. Jason, I think Hamilton is referring to Jacques Necker, chief finance minister of the French monarchy. I would assume the contemporary minister of the French monarchy would absolutely be he's referencing. Thank you so much, Troy. That's why I do these live, because sometimes I don't know absolutely everything throughout all of human history. Thank you so much, Troy. So just what Troy's updating us on there is earlier we were speaking about the patrols in France, the 20,000 police officers walking around France. That estimate was done by a Mr. Necker, who is Troy has let us know, is chief finance minister of monarchy at the time, though you would think he would have said Monsieur. Hamilton spoke French, right? A few armed vessels judiciously stationed at the entrance of our ports might at a small expense be made useful sentinels of the laws. So just the right boats in the right places could take care of this. And after the United States starts, Hamilton does start the Marine Cutter Corps, I believe it's called. Cutters were a type of boat. They were Hopley Yeaton was the one who was put in charge of it. He's known as the father of the Coast Guard at this point, for putting that together, because that is exactly what they would go on to do. And the government, having the same interest to provide against violations everywhere, the cooperations of its measures in each state would have a powerful tendency to render them effectual. So since the government is, the federal government, the national government would put a blanket over all of the states of one tax measure, it would make it more easy for the states to actually enforce that one thing instead of having competing laws of this nature. Here also we should preserve by union an advantage which nature holds out to us, and which would be relinquished by separation. So he's going to tell us something that would make it better if we work together. The United States lie at a great distance from Europe, and at a considerable distance from all other places with which they would have extensive connections of foreign trade. Okay, so we're far away from everyone. How does that help us, Hamilton? Let us know. The passage from them to us in a few hours or in a single night, as between the coasts of France and Britain and of other neighboring nations, would be impractical. So again, they take boats that take 2 weeks to get across the ocean. So he's saying here, they can't just come here tomorrow. It takes a while, as opposed to France could go to Britain tomorrow. They just sail across the channel. This is a prodigious security against a direct contraband with foreign countries, but a circuitous contraband to one state through the medium of another would be both easy and safe. So he's going back to what he was saying before. It'd be very hard for Great Britain or France or any other nation to sneak into America with stuff, but it would be easy for Connecticut to sneak goods into New York, for example. The difference between a direct importation from abroad and an indirect importation through a channel of a neighboring state in small parcels according to time and opportunity, with the added facilities of inland communication, must be palpable to every man of discernment. So just repeating, it would be super easy for crime-inspired people to do crime. It is therefore evident that one national government would be able, at much less expense, to extend the duties on imports beyond comparison, further than would be practicable to the states separately or to any partial confederacies. So one government would be easier to tax imports way better than any separate states can do it alone. And again, I haven't really talked too much about imposts, but it's essentially a tax of goods coming into the country. Hitherto, I believe, it may be safely asserted that these duties have not upon an average exceeded in any state 3%. So at this point, duties coming in from between states haven't gone over 3%, so fairly low, fairly affordable. In France, they're estimated to be about 15%, and in Britain, exceed this proportion, so even more than that. Oh, thanks. Was Ike? Well, I just sound smart because I'm reading Hamilton's words, but thank you very much. I will play video games after we hang up tonight. And there are a few games I want to stream, but I need to get a better computer, although I'm using a whole new software system, so I might be able to try it again pretty soon, but we'll get there, bud. We'll get there. Thank you for coming. There seems to be nothing to hinder their being increased in this country to at least treble their present amount. So if the states continue separately, then the 3% they're using could treble, which is triple, I believe, in old-timey speak. So it could be a lot more expensive if the states remain separate. The single article of ardent spirits under federal regulation might be made to furnish a considerable revenue. So, under the Constitution, we could raise a lot, but I bet you he's going to say keeping percentages low. Upon a ratio to the importation into this state, the whole quantity imported into the United States may be estimated at 4 millions of gallons, which at a shilling per gallon would produce 200,000 pounds. So when he says ratio into this state, he's writing in New York to the people of New York. So this state means New York. But there's so much more being imported to all the states, and we could just do it a little bit to all the states. We'd raise way more than having 3% in New York, making things more affordable to you and raising more revenue for the whole. That article would well bear this rate of duty, and if it should tend to diminish the consumption of it, such an effect would be equally favorable to the agriculture, the economy, the morals, and the health of the society. So he's talking about ardent spirits. So he's talking about liquor. So he's saying, okay, even if we tax liquor coming in from other nations, even if you don't want to pay that tax, that's what makes it an indirect tax as opposed to a direct tax. You don't have to buy that liquor coming from overseas. In fact, if people don't want to drink that overseas liquor, then our agriculture here can grow more wheats and barleys and hops, and we could make more alcohol ourselves, and then we could drink it at a more affordable rate, and it's stimulating the economy because we're making it here. This is kind of what he was saying right at the beginning about how commerce versus agriculture, like industry versus agriculture, was already a debate even before Jefferson came back from France. And what he's saying is, what he did say was, it's not a debate. They're not against each other. And here he's kind of verifying that, where he's saying, okay, it'll come in, and if you don't want to pay the tax, you don't want to drink from outside, okay, well, our agriculture will stimulate our industry, and our industry will therefore stimulate our agriculture. There is perhaps nothing so much a subject of national extravagance as these spirits. Well, that's just a funny sentence. There's nothing so much. So the most extravagant thing we do as a nation is drink hard liquor. Thanks, Hams. What will be the consequence if we are not able to avail ourselves of the resource in question in its full extent? So what if we can't make enough liquor for everyone because we drink so much liquor? A nation cannot long exist without revenues. Okay, so we need to raise money somehow. Destitute of this essential support, it must resign its independence and sink into the degraded condition of a province. So if we can't raise money ourselves, we're just going to be taken over by someone else. We'll just be a state for another nation. This is an extremity to which no government will of choice accede. So no government is going to intentionally give up its power to another government. Oh, unless, of course, you ratify the Constitution he's trying to get you to ratify, in which case all the states are giving up their power. That's Very funny. Revenue, therefore, must be had at all events. So we need to raise money. We need to raise money. You guys cut that and loop that into some kind of gift for me. In this country, if the principal part be not drawn from commerce, it must fall with oppressive weight upon land. So if we can't make our money on import duties, then we have to tax land, which would be essentially a direct tax. It has already been intimated. It has been already intimated, 18th century language, folks. It has been already intimated that excises, in their true signification, are too little in unison with the feelings of the people to admit of great use being made of that mode of taxation. Nor, indeed, in the states where almost the sole employment is agriculture, are the objects proper for excise sufficiently numerous to permit very ample collections in that way. So let me say this: excises and imposts. Excise tax is essentially tax from within, and imposts are essentially tax from without. I know that's a terrible, vague definition, but we'll go with that for now. So what he's saying here is taxing land itself is not going to be good here. First of all, states where they grow a lot of stuff but don't make a lot of stuff, they're going to be more affected than the other states. And also, it's just harder to do. People find ways to get around it and things of that nature. And the people of the United States at that time and place were very much against that kind of taxation, as the Anti-Federalists were very publicly saying. Personal estate, as has been before remarked, from the difficulty in tracing it, cannot be subjected to large contributions by any other means than by tax on consumption. So the only way you can really tax big property owners is to tax what they consume, not what they make, but what they purchase. Essentially sales taxes. In populous cities, it may be enough the subject of conjecture to occasion the impression of individuals without much aggregate benefit to the state. But beyond these circles, it must, in a great measure, escape the eye and the hand of the tax gatherer. So, in more populated places, you could do these excises, taxes on what people own, which, as he says, will oppress the individuals, which everyone's against already, and it won't even really help the state. And not only that, but it's very hard to do. People are going to be super sneaky about it. So right now, Hamilton is arguing against both taxes on property and sales taxes, kind of to get people on his side and understand, well, we need money somehow, might as well do it on imports. As the necessities of the state, nevertheless, must be satisfied in some mode or other, the defect of the other resources must throw the principal weight of public burdens on the possessors of land. So since we won't really be able to tax what people what people buy, we'd have to do it directly on land because we know acreage. We know how much they have. And as, on the other hand, the wants of the government can never obtain an adequate supply unless all the sources of revenue are open to its demands, the finances of the community under such embarrassments cannot be put into a situation consistent with its respectability or its serenity. So, respectability or its security. So, if a government cannot get enough money, the finances of the community, if the government cannot get enough money, then the community, the society itself, cannot act appropriately, essentially. Thus, we shall not even have the consolations of a full treasury to atone for the oppression of that valuable class of citizens who are employed in the cultivation of land. So, we will have to, if we need money, then we'll have to default to what he calls oppressing, but taxing landowners, even though they're the ones cultivating the soil. And again, I will note, most people were farmers at this point. Most, like 90% of Americans, when he's writing this, are farmers. And he's saying if we can't collect it on the things we're importing and selling to the farmers who are exporting the food, then we're going to have to collect it straight from the farmers, and that's oppression. We will be making life harder, specifically on the people who grow the most important things. And it will be at those expense of those people that will help what he calls commerce or industry or factories. That's not going to be very good for anyone that will put commerce and agriculture at odds, like he was saying before, even though it really shouldn't be. But public and private distress will keep pace with each other in gloomy concert and unite in deploring the infatuation of those councils which led to disunion. Publius. So he's ending here by saying agriculture and commerce will be at each other's throats. We will not succeed. This different separate state governments won't be able to raise enough revenue to keep things going. Everything will fall apart, and we will blame the councils who led to disunion, the anti-federalists, the people who said the Constitution was a bad idea. They're the bad idea. Alexander Hamilton. So that is it for this particular episode of Federalist Review. Federalist, real long. I got through it. Now that I'm speaking on my own in modern language, I can't seem to say it. Let me know what you think of the new setup. Took me a while. I still have some things to work out. The colors. I don't have my keys to like quick change screens, but there's a whole lot of more fun stuff coming up. Thank you, Troy. Now I have to go over and mull over Hamilton's points. You think about them. He always makes a few good ones. As much as I don't love his particular writing style, and as much as I disagree with some of his conclusions, he always makes a few fun points in there. Especially how Americans drink too much, which I thought was hilarious. Let me know if you have any questions, email, social media, all in the description down below. Don't forget to hit exclamation point Continentals to see how much you've saved by watching this video. Those will come into play on Friday. We'll talk more about some of the mini games I've added for trivia. So trivia Fridays at 8:30. 8 o'clock we'll do a review to warm up for the questions. 8:30 will be trivia Eastern time. Hope to see you there. Every time you're watching, anyone watching now live, you've been getting points this entire time. In fact, all you have to do is type in, if I can type it here, it's exclamation point Continentals, enter, and wait a few seconds, and it will tell you how much you've earned, and that will benefit you on Friday at trivia, because there's a bunch of games. We'll be able to play like a whole bunch of fun stuff coming up. So make sure you do that, earn those Continentals, and I will be back with you. Put out my founders every day. I missed a few this week, which I apologize for. I was doing all this. But there'll be a founder tomorrow. Actually, look for tomorrow morning. Ben Franklin's hoax. Poor Richard Almanac. When he started Poor Richard's Almanac, he started it with a hoax. So look for that tomorrow. And then we're going to ask questions about it on Friday. And I will probably be doing Federalist number 13 tomorrow at the same time. So thank you guys so much for all your support. Really love it. I will be back with another founder for you tomorrow.